The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast.
Johnson driving, Hayes is there, pocket pass, Bridges puts it down. 15 points for Mikal Bridges of the Phoenix Suns.
He is absolutely putting on the show here in this third quarter.
Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike. Sam, how you doing?
They're back. They're back.
They're
Some
back,
will say,
yes.
Some will
Yes.
say, y'all should have never doubted. And I understand that perspective. And to an extent, I didn't doubt their capacity to play like this when they're at their best. But we were all a little bit nervous. We were all sweating a little bit coming into this. And here's what it really was, Mike, before we get into the main story of the day, the main story of the game here, which is obvious, the main player. It wasn't so much even how the Suns lost last time, which was a little bit demoralizing, a 15-point loss in Game 4, but it was just that Chris Paul looming question of health coming into this game, right?
Yeah.
That was the concern. They answered.
And that's, yes.
They made so many adjustments.
Really? They did, yes.
They made so many adjustments. We have so much to talk about in this one. They made so many adjustments. They answered so many questions. But let's begin with the man of the fucking hour, Mikal Bridges. The Mikal Bridges game.
I was tempted to just start recording and then just say Mikal Bridges over and over and over again, and then upload that.
People would have listened to it.
Episode.
They loved it.
In fact, it may have like topped out as our most listened to podcast of all time. Because who cares about the rest of the stuff we say? But I almost feel like Reggie Miller, in particular, spent so much time talking about Alvarado that the average person watching this game may not have even realized just how spectacular what Mikal Bridges did in this game was. Because, look, the scoring is obvious, and of course they talked about the scoring. But guarding the two best players on the court the entire game, he was essentially on CJ to start the game. As soon as CJ went out, Mikal Bridges never went out, so he switched to guarding Ingram, and he did an excellent job on Ingram. I think it ended with 4 blocks, 2 steals, and shut down each of those guys essentially every single time. I can't remember a single time they scored on him. Basically every single time he was guarding them.
Could check the tracking data tomorrow. The 4 blocks definitely helps, though, to the point that you were making about Reggie and maybe like catering the narrative towards the casuals. The fact that you got those kind of slightly more eye-popping highlights, like you could visually see his length bother and disrupt those shots, and he was disrupting them all night. But like to actually see him rack up a few blocks in the stat sheet, it helps. We know that sort of stuff helps narratives.
It's just amazing to see him succeed like this, and at home, right in front of the home crowd, which is especially fun for the viewing experience, so you hear the crowd, but the people that are there got to see it. I mean, the best game of his career in a high leverage moment, tied 2-2. We all know the statistics. They're very high. The team that wins in Game 5 in a series that's tied 2-2 most of the time goes on to win the series. So for Mikal Bridges to have that kind of game in this scenario, it's just beautiful. He's just one of the most likable guys on the team in the NBA, in my opinion. And to see him succeed like this is just great. It's funny, too, because often the best defenders, or the guys that get a ton of credit for their defense in the playoffs, are irritants who do almost nothing else but irritate people. The Patrick Beverleys, the Jose Alvarados, guys like that who literally their job, and even Jay Crowder to some extent, who does play good defense, but they get so much attention because of the storylines that they generate from the annoying things that they do. Mikal Bridges doesn't get on people's nerves in the sense that he's doing some extra pushing or shoving or tripping guys in inappropriate ways, the kinds of things that guys do. Mm-hmm. He just plays solid defense over and over and over and over and over and over again, and just wears them down to the end of the game where they're struggling to get shots over him and they're short. It's just amazing to see it, and maybe that's why it's harder for people to recognize just how good he's doing.
Well, and he's not a loudmouth. He doesn't force himself into the conversation to the same extent.
He's good at other stuff. Well, he's not just good at that, like Alvarado.
Okay. There are irritants historically in the NBA who I think you could say, they're primarily known as defensive irritants, but they're good at other stuff. But specifically in the case of a guy like Pat Bev, there's a clear distinction between what Mikal Bridges does, which is just puts his head down and goes to fucking work, versus Pat Bev, who always wants to make it very clear that he's the loudest person on the court at any given time, no matter what impact he's having on the court.
Right.
Now, to that point, though, this was maybe the most animated I've seen Mikal Bridges ever in a game.
Right.
Like, he was talking shit today after buckets, after he was cutting to the basket, beating them off the dribble, whatever, making his threes. He was talking shit, and he doesn't usually do that, so that's kind of an indication also, A, just how badly the Suns wanted this game. Duh. Yeah. It was pretty much a must-win. But B, they're matching the Pelicans' energy, because the Pelicans players have been talking shit in this series. Pelicans fans have been going crazy in this series now that they, obviously, rightfully so, they think they have a legitimate chance in the series, which they do. So they've started talking all sorts of crazy shit, and the Suns are matching that. They're really matching that with an energy.
Finally.
Not just from the usual suspects. I mean, you expect Jay Crowder to talk shit. You expect Chris Paul to be a maniac.
Campaign, too, likes to talk.
Yeah, you don't necessarily expect it from Mikal Bridges. And by the way, just pulling up his page now, Mikal Bridges, we know as an Iron Man. We all think of him as an Iron Man, the guy who's not missed a game his entire NBA career to this point. In last year's entire finals run, do you want to guess the most amount of minutes that Mikal Bridges logged in any playoff game last year?
What is it?
It's 40. He played 40 minutes in one game against, actually, the Los Angeles Lakers in the first round. He never logged 40 minutes. And this is a guy who, people who watch the Suns all the time, which most people listen to this podcast, obviously, know that Mikal Bridges logs more minutes than anyone else on the Suns. At least that's the way it's been this year. Last year in the playoffs, he did not reach 40 minutes once, even in the finals in the do-or-die games against Milwaukee, because the Suns were still running their kind of more versatile deep wing rotation where Torrey Craig was getting minutes, Jay Crowder got minutes, Cam Johnson got minutes, and Mikal simply did not have the opportunity to do that. Tonight he plays 47 minutes. By
47 minutes.
A career high.
Guarding two completely different versatile scorers who do different things on the floor, and then still at the end of the game, when there are breakaway plays, is able to throw down dunks, back-to-back dunks to close out the game. I mean, this dude's conditioning, the shape that he's in, and his ability to fight through being tired. I've never seen him look tired. Like, he just doesn't look tired, and he plays an insane amount of minutes, essentially the most of any real players in the NBA. Basically, that's what he's done. He's one of 5 players to play every single game in the NBA this season, and he played the most minutes of those 5 players. It's just a remarkable thing to see him do the things that he does over and over and over again. And now, on the other end of that, because I'm focusing on defense, because I just think, I said it online, I think this was the best defensive performance by a Suns player that I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't think that anything comes close. It's hard to
I
even...
can't think of an obvious counterpoint for you. I can't.
Yeah. And on the other end of that, he had 31 points on 17 shots, went 4 for 4 from the three-point line, and was plus 13 overall. I mean, offensively, he had an amazing game as well.
Sean Marion may have had... you would have to really go back and watch the tape.
Yeah.
Into the backlog. Sean Marion may have had some performances where he saved that team's ass defensively. And this team is so much more solid around it. Like, Mikal is great.
Right.
DeAndre Ayton was also fantastic. I mean, everyone was
amazing.
Good. Everyone was good defensively tonight. Ayton was fantastic.
But specifically those two guys. Yeah. Really.
No, for sure.
Because, Mikal Bridges was doing it all, chasing guys around. Every single time somebody got into the paint, there was a monster in DeAndre Ayton meeting them there. He got a few fouls out of that, but that does not matter because more often than not, he was contesting shots at the rim.
3 fouls in 35 minutes. He's so good still at picking his spots. I mean, that's nothing for a starting center, that's great. And this is what I was talking about earlier, by the way. It's nice to see Mikal actually get his hand on the ball, rack up those 4 blocks, because if you just look at the box score, DeAndre Ayton didn't have any steals. He didn't have any blocks, and he played 35 minutes. But if you just go back and watch every single rim contest from DeAndre Ayton tonight, not to mention the post-up defense on Valanciunas, which has been a given all series long. He always makes it difficult. Not to say that Jonas misses all of those shots, but he makes it difficult. He was terrific, even if he didn't like officially record a block or something like that.
Stats are broken, but just even looking at the difference between JaVale guarding Jonas and DeAndre Ayton guarding Jonas, there's like this obvious eye test thing that happens where you could just see Jonas kind of kills JaVale, and the double big lineups which debuted today in the game that we just saw actually went pretty well. In fact, I would say that. It was, at least in the first half, one of the better stretches of the game. In the second half, maybe not quite as good, but I wouldn't say that there was a reason to think that they wouldn't do that in the next game. I guess we can transition over into some adjustments that we saw. That was probably, that's the most, I think the most obvious adjustments to most people who watch the game are the personnel ones, right? Because it's just all of a sudden there's a different player in the game, and it's obvious to everyone.
It's right in your face, for sure.
So that's the first one I saw.
Some of those were situational, so we'll talk about the other ones that were kind of, there was a lot of foul trouble tonight, so I think that affected the rotations for sure. But the adjustment that I think has the most staying power here that I now expect to see throughout the series is we both got a stint of, we got both a stint of Ayton with JaVale in the first quarter, late first quarter, I want to say that was, right?
Maybe early second too,
And then obviously Ayton stayed on the floor longer than usual, which forced Biyombo into the rotation where he wouldn't typically be. And then in the third quarter, that's where we got the second 2-man big lineup stint, that time of JaVale and Biyombo. And I thought the offense looked stilted like I expected it would be. It wasn't an obvious, like, they didn't go out there and crush them. This wasn't some brand new death lineup, but they did what they set out to accomplish, which was really bring a new physicality to the game. And I thought, they succeeded in that. The defense absolutely held up during those minutes. And the biggest thing that I was stressing before the game is that prior to bringing an extra big in there, the Suns' strategy when JaVale was in the game is he just played this deep drop coverage because he's not the sort of versatile type of big that DeAndre Ayton is, where he can play all sorts of different schemes. More on that in a couple minutes, I think. But they were getting killed. They were getting killed over and over and over again because Brandon Ingram would use screens and he would get into that drop, and there would be a trailing defender who couldn't get back in time, and he would kill us. CJ was killing him too, with to an extent, with pull-up threes. So they needed an adjustment to that. I think we debated at the end of last game that if they're hemorrhaging rebounds this badly, they could just go smaller. And I still don't necessarily think, that would have been the wrong idea either. Like, they could have just brought a small ball 5 out there and switched everything, but they ended up going big instead, and it worked tonight. You can't argue with the results, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, I actually think the small ball lineups work better when Devin Booker is basically the point guard, right? You have a 6'6" guy in there instead of a 6-foot Chris Paul in, which makes it a little bit harder. But I think one of the things that we lamented at the end of the last game was the Torrey Craig minutes, and we talked about how he was just getting killed out there. And one of the things that happened in this game when they went to the double big lineups wasn't just the fact that they had 2 bigs in there. They also completely eliminated the Torrey Craig minutes that were bad. And, sometimes it is an addition by subtraction because you're taking out a guy that was killing you and putting a guy in, maybe Biyombo sort of, he's even for the game when he in his minutes played. Maybe he treaded water a little bit. Maybe he wasn't like a major positive, but he also wasn't a major negative. And I think being able to be at least someone who could tread water a little bit outside of Craig, who was getting killed, helps. And I think Biyombo, you talked about JaVale sitting way back in the drop, which is all he can do, really. I think we know that at this point. Whereas Biyombo was up. He even forced a turnover by trapping on the sidelines.
Yes. I was going to say not just up, because Biyombo, first of all, you can start, the Suns principally build their defense around this drop coverage. It's the way they've played it all year. When Biyombo's in the drop, he's already a step higher than JaVale is, a step or two higher. He's playing much closer to the level. But then you toss in all the other stuff that he did. He hedged CJ a couple of times so that CJ couldn't turn the corner and get around him. And then, like you said, he outright blitzed a couple of times as well. And that's what DeAndre was doing
Graham,
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Devontae Graham. And that's what DeAndre was doing all night as well. He was doing a phenomenal job of picking spots between trapping,
100%.
trapping, blitzing, hedging. I mean, I think we saw everything from the Suns tonight, except maybe a zone. I don't remember them ever going to a zone. But they basically forced, and this is exactly what you want to do in a playoff setting where you see the other team so many times in a short time span, is never allow their best offensive initiators to gain a level of comfortability with what your defense is doing. And, I think CJ and Ingram both saw the number of different schemes that the Suns were deploying tonight, plus the brand new rotations, and they were never able to gain that comfort in their offense. So, there was a brilliant chess. We kind of knew that it was coming to an extent, but even so, I'm sure Willie Green kind of knew it was coming as well. Even so, brilliant chess move by Monty Williams there that absolutely worked.
Yeah, part of me wonders if Willie was trying to bait Monty into playing two bigs to see if they could exploit it by playing two bigs in the last game, because he knows that that's something that Monty's unafraid to try to do. And it didn't work out in their favor in this game. The next game will be interesting. We've talked about it in the last game. Role players tend to play better at home. The Pelicans had that in the last game. The Suns, I think, had that in this game. To some extent, Cameron Johnson wasn't as good as he could be.
Yeah.
Obviously, Mikal Bridges played like a superstar. And then outside of that, I think Cameron Payne, who I think at times felt like he was worse than he was.
I mean, if you
but
look
looking at it after the game, 12 points, 1 assist, 3 rebounds, 4 for 10. Basically, he shot 40% on the year. Like, that's kind of he shot on the year.
He had a massive roller coaster performance where people were either thrilled with what he was doing or just completely angry about his performance on the court, and that's understandable. But I think, if you look at the results of 12 points in 12 minutes for Campaign, specifically the fact that he was finally able to see a 3 go in the net, he shot 2 for 3, and like in those specific lineups, I remember at the end of the third quarter, they had JaVale and Biyombo on the floor. Chris was on the bench, and it was just clear that there was going to be nothing going offensively here. So the only offense the Suns could generate was Campaign step back into a 3, and it's like the fact that shot went in tonight was critical, because if that shot didn't go in and Campaign once again played like he did in games 1 through 4, we would be talking much differently, I think, and the online discourse would be much different about that 2 big lineup. You needed to squeeze some sort of offense out of it for it to become viable, and most of that was Campaign.
And 12 points in 11 minutes. The 11 minutes is because he fouled out.
Right,
and he just could not help himself. He was fouling over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, look, he had boneheaded plays tonight.
Yeah,
no doubt.
On the other side of that, though, too, I do think when he drives to the rim, he does not get the same calls that they're getting driving to the rim, because he gets bumped from the side on a significant number of his drives, throwing him off balance, and then he jumps towards the rim and just doesn't get those calls. And I don't know that there's a way around that other than, I don't know, Monty taking another fine, to talk specifically about Cameron Payne, because, that definitely helped, I think, with the refs in this game. Even the free throw disparity ended up being pretty bad. I do think the Suns got more fair calls on their side of the ball than they did in the last game, outside of Cameron Payne, who struggled. And I think that, by the way, that those fouls, I think, led to the Aaron Holiday minutes. I don't think Aaron Holiday was part of the plan in this game. He did play, obviously, but I think it was entirely because of that foul trouble. And if you want to know one thing that tipped me off to that, there was a extended play where Chris Paul had to tell Aaron Holiday where to be every step of the play. He was pointing him around the court like he was controlling him with an Xbox controller. And Aaron Holiday just did not know where he needed to be. And it's probably because he wasn't part of the game plan when it comes to running that play with Chris Paul off the ball, because that's another adjustment we can talk about. A lot of Chris Paul off the ball in Suns sets in this game, where Chris Paul often, when plays are being run off the ball, he's often either the guy with the ball in his hands or a guy at the wing waiting for the pass when Devin Booker's doing stuff with the ball. In this play, he was involved in a lot of actions where Devin Booker normally is. So in the elbow sets or setting screens under the rim or coming around these sort of pin down screens that Devin Booker comes around to catch the ball to run the offense from the top of the key. That was a major adjustment. And you combine that with another very slight adjustment, which was passing the ball in faster. This is a small thing. And then whoever catches it, Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, Cameron Johnson most often, Cameron Payne or Aaron Holiday if they're in, running it up the floor faster. So when they do catch it, if they take the ball out fast, they catch them off guard with their press, and those two guys run it up faster. Chris Paul's running around a pin down screen. Well, now they're starting to play with 18, 19 seconds on the shot clock instead of 15 or 14 when Chris Paul is hounded on his way. And I think the Suns do a really good job. Everyone's a pretty good passer on the catch in that 0.5 system, and they do a lot better of a job when they have extended time on the shot clock. And I think they basically executed that most of the time really well in this game.
Yeah, I agree. So Chris Paul played 21 minutes in the first half, which is an insane amount of minutes for a guy like that, who obviously you're trying to limit, but they need it. He's that good, and the offensive drop-off is still significant when he comes off the floor. It's just obvious. But all I could think about when we got to the second half was, and they were obviously trying to preserve him, was all of that research that we've heard about this season about how one of the main lessons that the Suns learned from last year's finals run is the toll that the playing time and specifically the touches were taking on Chris Paul and Devin Booker as lead initiators, and how their research showed, yes, you want your lead initiators to be available to run critical sets at the end of a game. That's how you become such a well-executed, great, clutch performing team like the Suns are, but you wanted to limit their touches as much as possible. You wanted to limit the burden throughout the first three quarters, and that's absolutely what the third quarter looked like when Chris Paul was on the floor. He was starting sets in the corner, and there were sets like you were talking about where he would come up off the pin down and catch on the wing or whatever, or the top of the key, and become once again involved just as a secondary look. There were also sets where it would be like Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder take the ball up, and they kind of work a 2 or 3 man game with DeAndre Ayton, and Chris Paul spends the entire possession in the corner.
Yeah.
And was it the most efficient offense I've ever seen? No. Was it viable for like 3 or 4 possessions at a time while the Suns were already up by 12 points just to give Chris Paul that rest that he obviously needed when you couldn't directly send him to the bench because Cam Payne had foul trouble and you still needed him out there, but you just didn't want to ride him too hard? It worked for that. It was an effective strategy for that. And so that speaks to the development in Mikal and Jay, as well as guys who can come in and play make. The other guy who we obviously need to talk about as it relates to this, though, is Landry Shamet. And this is...
Yes, thank you, yes.
I'm going to let you... This is the other big adjustment tonight. I'm going to let you kind of fire away your takes on this, because I think you're... I'm not anti-Landry Shamet at all, but I think you have typically been the guy pushing for Shamet a little bit more. So explain to me... well, just to set the stage, Landry Shamet tonight, he played 25 minutes... 6 points, 3 rebounds, 0 assists. Statistically, I wouldn't say it was the best performance, but I would say there was a certain fluidity to the offense that was obviously present when Landry Shamet was out there. And I think you are well acquainted with the philosophy behind that. So take it away.
Yeah. Well, I think there's 2 things that you got to point out with this specific Landry Shamet game. And one is that the 25 minutes was partially due to Jay Crowder being in foul trouble, and that sort of forced Monty's hand to play Landry Shamet, I think, more minutes than he intended to. In the last podcast, those of you who are willing to listen after losses, you'll probably remember that I said the lineup of Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson, and DeAndre Ayton should play more in this game. It played pretty extended stretches of time in the first... or sorry, should say the second quarter and the fourth quarter, which is, to close out the second quarter. And then before Cameron Payne came in to close out the fourth quarter, that was the lineup that was on the floor for a pretty extended stretch as well. And so obviously he was on the floor, I think, partially because Jay Crowder would have normally been on the floor during that time. But the other side of that, and something that I didn't talk about in the last episode that I think surprised me with this game, is that he played really great defense on CJ McCollum.
He did.
Chasing him around screens, contesting shots, not fouling, and just making it basically as difficult as possible on CJ by the time he caught the ball, and then playing sound defense, moving his feet, and contesting when CJ did shoot. Now, CJ, of course, still made some shots on Landry Shamet, but I think Landry Shamet, for someone who is on the floor without Jay Crowder on the floor, and in those scenarios, Mikal Bridges switches on to Brandon Ingram, that effort that he put in on CJ is partially what led to CJ opening the second half on an 0 for 8 run. And I think that was huge, and that surprised me a lot, because when I talked about playing Landry Shamet with that lineup, I was talking about a guy who could bring the ball down when Chris Paul was being hounded, and somebody who could initiate the sets at least with the first dribbles and the first pass, and then still be able to do some things off the ball, which is something Chris Paul struggles to do because it's just not his game. So, having said all that, I think he played even better than I anticipated him playing. You know, I don't know that I was overall convinced that he needs to play any more minutes than he played. This might be the total extent of what he should play, but maybe 20 minutes makes more sense for Landry Shamet. And I think the defense, and I asked our friend Krishna with the B-Ball Index about Landry, because I remember he was in the top 6 for chaser role defense in the NBA this season, about halfway through the season, and then ended up ending the season 18th in the whole NBA as a chaser, which puts him, you know, if every team has one chaser basically on the floor, this is a defensive role as determined by the B-Ball Index that basically chases guys around screens. And he's in the top 20 of that kind of role, and I think we saw why he rates so well in that specific advanced statistic in this specific game. I thought he was really great.
Yeah, I mean, I continue to think, like, I didn't think he played great tonight, and in fact, I think he played well tonight. Let me phrase this properly so that people don't think I'm coming after the guy. I think some people will point to obvious lowlights that Landry had tonight. There was one really bad turnover in transition, for instance. It should have been
it was super dumb.
Should have been an easy alley-oop to Mikal. And I think it's plays like that where A, maybe it's nerves, but B, you also see that Landry is mostly a smart player who's trying his best out there, but continues to have limitations. The athletic limitations come out on defense as well. To your point, he's really good as a chaser. I think he's really effective on CJ. He's obviously not effective on Brandon Ingram, and I don't blame him for that. When they,
he shouldn't be on him.
With the Pelicans, when they were able to switch Mikal Bridges off of Ingram in favor of anyone else, Torrey Craig, they've been killing all series long. He didn't even touch the floor tonight. But either Jay Crowder or Landry Shamet, Chris Paul, obviously they love to get Brandon Ingram on Chris Paul too, which the Suns continue to concede for the most part.
Yeah,
he kills all of those guys. Shamet not included. He just doesn't have the length. So those limitations continue to be there, and that applies to offense too. The athletic limitations are there, but he tries. We've seen a couple of the flashy dunks this series from Landry.
Yeah.
It comes when you least expect it. Most importantly, he's going to keep the ball moving, and the offense without Devin Booker needs a guy who's willing to keep the ball moving like Landry Shamet does, who's willing to get into the mid-range area and take some shots that maybe other guys are afraid to, even if not all of them go in. So, he's not the best player I've ever seen. He's not a guy who I even want to be playing heavy minutes, especially once Booker comes back. But for the
maybe
time
zero.
being,
yeah.
Totally. He's satisfactory, though, for the time being. And, he played a solid game, and it was an important adjustment. I don't think he'll play 26 minutes next game, but it was an important adjustment for this one.
For as good as he did on CJ in this game, that is absolutely not something you can count on in a future game. Look, there's a chance he does just as well and he makes life difficult for him. But I do think that, a lot of times, Mikal Bridges just being in their head, getting into their head a little bit early is what helps guys that guard them late. And I think that had something to do with it in this game. But I think there's, if Landry Shamet is playing in the next game and guys are not in foul trouble and CJ starts to kill him, you just pull him. That's just an easy pull. You don't need to play him if you have other guys that can take those minutes. And I think in this game, as it was coming down towards the end of the game, Monty made a change and put Cameron Payne in that role, playing with Chris Paul. And look, Cameron Payne, ups and downs, as we know, and he ended up fouling out. But I do think that he has the ability to be the secondary ball handler much better than Landry Shamet. So I think those minutes made sense as far as what Monty did. Let's see. Are there any other adjustments that stood out to you that you wanted to touch on?
There are not any other major ones, at least on the Suns side. Do you have any thoughts at this point in the series on the Pelicans rotation? Because I think what's kind of interesting, so now Game 6 is an elimination game for the Pelicans, obviously. Looking at the box score tonight, it's almost deceiving because Brandon Ingram was a minus 16. Herb Jones was a minus 11. Some of their best players, their starters, who are already being given this heavy burden and asked to... Brandon Ingram, I think, has played over 40 minutes in every game this series. The box score would tell you that those guys struggle tonight, but it's just clear they played their best basketball when they're on the floor. It's just clear. Their bench, Alvarado is a one-trick pony, but he can't shoot. Like, it's nice that he's forced 2 8-second violations on Chris Paul in the entire series. That's 2 possessions gained, but I think you'd rather have CJ McCollum now play 45, 46 minutes like Mikal Bridges just did in an elimination game and get rid of the guy who shoots 10% from deep, stuff like that. Larry Nance has been a little bit neutralized, maybe you could say, by the 2 big lineup that the Suns are deploying. Devontae Graham had 2 good games in the series, but he was terrible tonight. Trey Murphy III, who we thought was going to be a big player, remember, in this series, Mike. We were wrong about this one because Willie Green has actually gone in the opposite direction. Tonight, Trey Murphy played 13 minutes, didn't even attempt a single shot. I thought his spacing was going to be huge for them, and he has played fewer minutes, if anything, as the series has gone on. So where do the Pelicans flip to now? Is it just Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Jonas play 45 minutes each next game, and
and Herb.
they ride, and Herb, and they just ride those guys as much as they can? Or is there anything else?
There's one obvious adjustment, and that's Alvarado taking the rest of Graham's minutes, because Alvarado 20 minutes in this game, and look, I think that Alvarado at times has hit shots in this series that makes it seem like he's a good 3-point shooter, but I mean, over time we've learned that he's not a great 3-point shooter, so it's hard to really believe that that's sustainable.
And
the Suns, the effort.
The Suns clearly, by the way, played him like he was a terrible 3-point shooter because every single one of his attempts was wide open. I'm talking nearest defender 15 feet away. He's not a concern of theirs. But
Devontae Graham was useless in the last 2 games. I think he has to hit shots to be valuable. He's not providing any outsized playmaking. His defense is bad. He's small. He's not getting rebounds. And the Suns do a good job of defending him when he's dribbling the ball. Can't finish at the rim. And then you have Alvarado, who at the very least, puts a ton of pressure on Chris Paul, bringing the ball up the floor and gets on his nerves a little bit. And sometimes that is not good because Chris Paul tends to play well when he's angry. But I do think that I just don't really see a reason to play Devontae Graham going forward. I think what they're worried about is exactly what happened in this game, where the Suns are now finally hitting shots. And for the Pelicans, if they continue to win the rebounding battle, which they clearly are capable of doing and probably will do in the next game as well, if they lose the turnover battle, if they lose the assist battle, and then massively lose the 3-point shooting battle, then it's kind of over for them. So I think that's why they keep trying Devontae Graham, but I would be surprised if we see, at the very least, if Devontae Graham plays in the first half, he might not play in the second half of the next game, which may have even happened in this game. I can't remember exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an obvious one for me.
I think that's probably the main one. I turning back towards the Suns now here as we're beginning to wrap up on this one, probably, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just want to point out it was such a relief to finally see some shots fall. The Suns shot 37% from deep tonight. To us, I think that felt like 90%.
Yeah.
Because of how terrible they had been in the series. But
yeah,
37% is barely better than, I think their season average was 36% as a team, 36.5%. Like, basically, the Suns had a 15-point win tonight. Granted, it was at home, and there were other factors that always help you at home. But they had a 15-point win tonight in a game where they just shot like an average team from deep.
Yeah.
And if we ever get one of those, I know we've been saying this for a while, but if the floodgates really open,
yeah,
and we get one of those more signature kind of Suns offensive machine type performances of, oh, they're shooting 45, close to damn near 50% from deep tonight as a team. I mean,
if Cameron Johnson could have more than 2 threes in a game and Landry Shamet could just hit 1 or 2.
I only say that to point out that some people will look at the box score tonight. They'll say, well, Chris Paul had 22 points. DeAndre Ayton had 19. Mikal Bridges had his playoff career high. Yeah, they played a good game, but this is their ceiling, right? This is their offensive ceiling without Devin Booker. And they definitely played much better. They played probably an above average performance maybe, or at least an average performance for what this current crop is capable of playing without Devin Booker. But it's absolutely not their offensive ceiling. There's another level that they could take this to if just the right guys were hitting shots.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And it'd be nice to see specifically Cameron Johnson get it going from the outside, because we just have yet to see that happen. And that has to happen at some point. You know, to finish the series off, obviously that can be a catalyst in that. But if they get out of this first round, they just need Cameron Johnson at some point to really show up. And we have yet to see that. Now, obviously, we spent a lot of time talking about Mikal Bridges. I just want to say a couple other guys before we end this one. Chris Paul, 22, 11, and 6, 8 for 18. Started the game actually shooting shots, which was nice to see. And then DeAndre Ayton, who we talked about his defense, also had another great game offensively, 19 points, 9 rebounds, and I think 3 important assists. I think all 3 came either the awesome pass that he had to Jay Crowder, or the other 2, I believe, were on the short roll. So he was catching the ball in the middle of the floor and making decisions with it. And that's a great, great thing to see from him, where it's not just scoring. He's finding other guys. So 2 other great games I just wanted to give a shout out before we end this podcast. But do you got anything else before we go here?
Watch out, Suns fans, because I just learned that the game on Thursday is an early game, so don't let that trip you up. It is 7:30 Eastern time, which is like perfect for me. That's so great for me. For you guys, I hope you're off work by that hour. I hope it's not too difficult. Do you have any thoughts?
We're doing that one on playback, right?
And yeah.
For patrons? Yeah,
I was going to get there. I
forgot.
I was going to get there. The other thing is that join us for patrons for that one on playback. So obviously, potential elimination game. Whatever may happen, we'll be there hanging out together, but we certainly hope that the Suns advance. And you can join us live for that one on playback. Should be fun.
Yep, we appreciate you guys. We'll be back after the next game. Hopefully, we'll be talking about the Suns in the second round of the playoffs.